Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Marketing Spotlight, where we share the career journeys of Michigan State University marketing alumni. I'm your host, Katie Sadler, and today with us we have Bronté LaMirand. Bronte graduated in 2014 with a degree in marketing and a minor in sales, and she is now an associate director for paid social at Wpromote. Bronte, thank you for joining us, and welcome to the Marketing Spotlight.
Thanks so much for having me, Katie. I'm happy to be here.
We're really excited to talk to you today. We're going to start out with some rapid fire questions. So some quick responses just to get to know you a little bit better. So first question, are you ready?
I'm always ready.
All right, go ahead and describe yourself in 3 words.
I would say adventurous, motivated, and compassionate.
And what dorm were you in as a freshman?
I lived in Hubbard.
Okay. What was your favorite undergraduate class?
I would say my favorite class, I forget what the exact class was, but it was for study abroad with Gil Harrell, the marketing study abroad.
I think that might be one of my favorite ones as well. That's a great answer. What was your first job after graduating?
I was a media planner at an advertising agency.
And who inspires you and why?
I don't have a specific person, but my interests are always changing. So I would say I'm inspired by life in general and all the opportunities that are available.
I love that answer. Bronte, what was the last book you read?
1984, which is a pretty grim book.
George Orwell, right?
Yep.
What is one of your current favorite hobbies?
I love rock climbing.
Wonderful. And what is your go-to restaurant when you are in East Lansing?
Sansu for some sushi.
Oh, I love that answer. And then last question, Dublin or the Riv?
Definitely Dublin. I worked there my junior and senior year, so I'm biased.
That's totally fair. All right, that wraps us up for rapid fire. Thanks for participating. And Bronte, now we really just want to learn more about you and your career path. So I think starting us at the top, why did you decide to major in marketing?
So I was actually one of those students who claimed undecided as my major for my first 2 years. And I had always been interested in business, and I also always had a creative side. So I decided on marketing because I felt like it was a really good middle ground. And I also had a large interest in psychology. And I think it really just combined all 3 of those pillars into one, and ultimately ended up in marketing that way.
I feel like that's a common answer that we get from a lot of students, that they really like business, but they want to flex their creative side or maybe open more doors as opposed to being segmented into like one industry, like a supply chain role or a finance role. So I think that's definitely a trend that we're seeing here on the podcast. Tell us more about psychology and why did you maybe not choose to major in psychology?
Well, one of the reasons at the time is I didn't like the idea of having to go to school for 8 to 12 years. And I think a big part of it too was that strong interest in business. And I find it really interesting to look at a business as a whole, which I think marketing makes you do, rather than kind of what you were saying about having to segment and function within a company. And then you can also bring in psychology because you have to understand and be able to relate to people in terms of what your business is offering.
Awesome. Bronte, tell us a little bit about your career path. So after you obtained your major in marketing, where did you go and how did you get to where you are today?
Sure. So I started off at an advertising agency doing media planning. With that, I was working with multiple different ways of advertising, including traditional media, so like radio and print and television, and then also digital marketing. I quickly fell in love with digital marketing. I also felt that there's the most opportunity in digital marketing because it's a growing industry and it's going to continue to be a growing industry. Really directed my career to be within that sector. From there, I started working as an account manager, a campaign manager, and had quite a few different roles within an agency surrounding digital marketing. Learned a lot about it. And then I began freelancing on the side of my full-time job. After, I would say, about 1.5 years of doing some freelance work, I actually ended up being able to quit my full-time job because the client that I had been able to grow so much with the time I was working with them that I was able to start working a lot more hours with them and then pick up a few more clients. So ended up leaving the corporate world for a couple of years because of that. So I'd say I was freelancing for about 2 to 3 years, working with different clients, doing various things, whether that be just general marketing consulting, as well as paid media. So paid social, paid search, programmatic advertising, which I can dive into a little bit more later. And now I've been able to apply all the skills I've learned by freelancing into my new role as Associate Director of Paid Social, working with Wpromote.
I definitely want to dive into a lot of what you just said, because I don't think that media and agency marketing is necessarily something that students get a lot of exposure to in some of their baseline marketing classes. So like take us all the way back and tell us a little bit about like, what is paid media?
Sure. So paid media falls under the major umbrella of digital marketing. So there's multiple forms of digital marketing. Paid media is one of those. So paid media itself is an umbrella for three main pillars of marketing, and that includes paid search, paid social, and programmatic or display advertising. So what paid search would be is Google ads. So you type in maybe like dog food into Google, and the first couple search results you see are actually paid advertisements. And it will say ad right next to it, when it is an ad. So that would be paid search. Programmatic, or also known as display advertising, would be some of those ads you see if you're on a website, like kind of like on the right-hand side or at the top of the page. And then for paid social, what that is any of the advertisements you see on the social media platforms you're on. So this includes Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat, even LinkedIn. One thing that you should take into consideration for paid social is it is not any organic posting. So any posting that businesses do, or even like what you and I could do on our social media, that isn't considered paid social. It is only referring to the paid advertisements that are on those platforms.
And Bronte, how did you learn so much about this space? Was this on the job education? Did you read books? How did you get educated in this area?
So a lot of it started off as on the job. Like I said, I just kind of took an interest in digital marketing. I sought out opportunities within the agency of setting up meetings with people who were above me and had a lot of experience in digital marketing, and then kind of set myself up in a way where I could get promoted into a role that would incorporate more digital marketing. So a lot of it was on the job. I was mostly trained in programmatic display advertising. And then once I started freelancing, I actually did a ton of self-education. So this included learning a lot through YouTube, doing research, reaching out to other people who built businesses off of paid social. So a lot of it was self-education. And I think that is a really, really important thing to take note of is if you're motivated to learn something, you can do it. And there's always a resource at your fingertips. You just got to kind of search for it and take the initiative to learn something.
Yeah, that's great. I think there's so much content available out in the world today that it's just a matter of knowing where to look and what you're looking for, and then going after it aggressively if you want to learn about a new space.
And I think it's important to have some kind of baseline or of understanding, because I've been out on the platforms or like on YouTube. Like I said, I've learned a lot through YouTube. However, there's a lot of crap on YouTube as well. So you got to kind of have a good baseline of what does seem like a good idea, and rather than just somebody who's trying to like get clicks or views or something, if you are using social platforms to educate yourself. So I think like reading credible sources and then maybe even utilizing some of those recommendations or credible sources, see if they have a YouTube channel or a podcast that you can learn from.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice for the listeners. Bronte, what do you like most about working on the agency side of marketing versus the client side?
So I can say the agency side is quite a hustle, and that can be a lot of fun sometimes. On some days when it's Friday and you're working a little late, it's not always as fun. But what I like most about working on the agency side is you are exposed to multiple different brands And for me, that keeps things really exciting. So for example, I've had clients who are apparel brands. I've had beauty brands. I've worked with roofers. I've worked with accountant clients, and right now I'm only working in the entertainment industry. So I've learned a lot about multiple different businesses across industries, and I've really enjoyed that. And I don't think I would have had that kind of exposure unless I was working at an agency.
Do you think that you'll always stay on the agency side?
I think probably not. Eventually, I would like to be working for only one company. The agency I'm at right now, I actually only have one client, and this is a first for me my entire career to only have one client to be focusing on. I actually do really like it too, because you're not being pulled into so many different directions. But that experience that I've had thus far in my career, I've thought it to be invaluable as far as just learning all the different industries and being able to apply different tactics from maybe like a beauty industry into a clothing brand industry. You're able to make those connections that you otherwise might not be exposed to.
Yeah, absolutely. And Bronte, can you tell us a little bit about maybe an example of a project that you've worked on? I know that there's probably a lot of confidentiality when it comes to agencies, but help us understand what a day in the life looks like for you.
Sure. So I can talk about a project I was just working on today. And I think it'd be fine to discuss. But one of my clients is in the entertainment industry, and we will be targeting people who are viewing the Olympics. So what I was working on today is looking at audience recommendations. And when I say audience recommendation, I'm talking about who do I want to target with our ads on social media for the Olympics, which is pretty exciting. So I'm looking at different age ranges. I'm looking at different interests, as well as occupations, things like that. And I'm a bit of a nerd in the sense that I love diving into data like that. So that's always been fun. So in the same context with this project, not only will I be developing the plan of who we're going to be reaching, I'll be developing the plan of how we will reach them within paid social, and then seeing that execution of the plan through.
So you're assessing who to talk to, on what platforms, using what tools, and essentially saying, how do we best reach these audiences to get our message out into market?
Exactly. And how much money should we spending on each of these platforms and why?
How do you make those decisions? Like, what types of data do you use to drive those decisions on whether or not you should be leveraging Facebook or TikTok, for example?
So I'll look at past performance of other campaigns and use that as an indicator. We also run what we call A/B tests. So for example, you could have maybe two different pieces of creative with two different messages on them. I'll send them out to the exact same audience and then see if I have more signups from creative piece A or creative piece B. And depending on what is more successful, I'll start applying that learning to my future campaigns. And you could do that in a variety of senses of like whether it be two different pieces of creative, two different audiences, different geographies. Yeah, a myriad of ways that you could utilize A/B testing.
So it sounds like there's a little bit of market research and CMI in what you do as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of analytics. I would say the creative piece to what I do is just thinking of new ways to approach a platform and consistently think of ways that you can be improving.
That's awesome. It sounds like really exciting work and very dynamic. Bronte, what would you say is one of the most helpful skills you've learned throughout your career?
I think I was kind of touching on this before, but I think it's really important to always be learning and have the self-confidence in driving yourself to learn something and know that you can learn it. I can't tell you how many times, especially while I was freelancing, I accepted some kind of position. I, of course, was always upfront about my knowledge on it, but I've always had this can-do attitude that, hey, if I don't know how to do it right now, I'm going to research it, I'm going to learn it, and I will get there no matter how hard it is. And I think that's been the most helpful skill for me in my career thus far, because every time I set my mind out to learn something new, I've always learned it, even if there is a pretty strong steep learning curve.
That's awesome. I think that's a very intimidating space for a lot of people to say, like, I don't know how to do this, but I'm going to go for it anyway. So I think that takes a lot of courage, but definitely
Yeah.
a great takeaway. Okay, we have one last question for you today. Is there any advice that you wish you had when you were a student?
I think I'm just gonna stick with my theme of this podcast, but I would say continue learning for your whole career after college. I don't think you're done learning there. And I think it's really important to find something you're passionate about and continue to research into that. And it's okay if those interests change, but always be learning more and taking that step, because after school, no one's going to tell you that you have a test coming up and you have to study for it. It's up to you at that point to carry on with your education.
That's great. Bronte, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. This has been fun.
Yes, absolutely. And for our listeners who are interested in connecting with Bronte, you can find her on LinkedIn. Make sure you also check out our other episodes of the Marketing Spotlight. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, and almost anywhere else you listen to podcasts. We'll talk to you next time.